Humans typically have a tendency to trust machines. They often defer to machines and think, well, the machine must be right. I'm very cautious about treating AI agents as if they're a person, a member of the team. A lot of companies I've seen feel that they can just kind of give people some AI and magic is going to happen.
In many of today's conversations about artificial intelligence, unfortunately, a lot of the loudest voices come from the people who are least qualified. And because the platforms reward whatever spikes engagement, the whole conversation gets yanked between two extremes: doom and hysteria on one side, and hype and delusion on the other. Meanwhile, the people who actually built these systems are mostly missing from the room. That's why I built this series, not to add another loud voice, but to bring people in who actually do this work, give them a proper seat, and let them bring clarity to this conversation. I'm Jeff Carson. For 2 decades, I built and governed AI algorithms inside financial services, hospitality, and retail, where I also led global data science teams before founding the AI Audit. Today, I'm super excited that my guest is Eitel-Porter, joining from London, England. Ray is a heavyweight in the AI space. He created and led Accenture's global responsible AI practice. He built the governance program that helped some of the largest companies in the world move from AI principles to actually operationalizing them across banking, healthcare, retail, and government. He's also the author of Governing the Machine, with endorsements from heavyweights from the likes of Reid Hoffman and Stuart Russell. Ray, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Jeff. I'm looking forward to an interesting discussion.
Well, Ray, let's start with the assumption almost everyone leans in on. Generally, people think, don't worry, there's a human in the loop. And you've argued that with agentic AI, that assumption starts to fall apart. Walk me through why.
Well, I think having a human in the loop is not a bad starting point. And certainly for the kinds of systems, AI systems that we had until more recently, having a human in the loop was a very good and effective form of AI governance. And I certainly wouldn't argue for ruling out human in the loop. But I do think that as we move into using AI agents, and particularly AI agents at scale, we are going to run into a number of problems with the human in the loop paradigm. So first of all, and this applies frankly even before AI agents, you have the challenge that humans aren't perfect either, right? So if a human is checking something, they may make mistakes, but in particular, if they're checking an increasing volume of things, there will be a tendency to relax. And ironically, this gets worse the more accurate the system becomes. If your system is making mistakes every, 3 or 4 times out of 10, you're likely to spot those mistakes. But if that error rate drops considerably and it's only occasionally wrong, keeping on your guard and keeping really attuned to spot those mistakes becomes even harder. And then we add to that the phenomenon that people call automation bias. And in fact, we've seen a number of different studies that have really illustrated the danger of this. I'll give you one example. There was a study published in Radiology magazine, which showed that when they gave radiologists a series of images, some of which had been falsely labeled as having some kind of medical issue on them, but they said that this was an issue that AI had flagged, the accuracy of less experienced radiologists dropped from around 80% to just over 20%. And in the case of even experienced, very experienced radiologists, their accuracy dropped from around the 80% mark to 45%. It's a really significant drop off where essentially the human radiologist was deferring to the AI label and not scrutinizing it enough themselves. And I think as we see, the volume of these AI-driven decisions increasing with agents in particular, humans just aren't going to be able to keep up, and they're definitely not going to be able to keep up with accuracy and attentiveness.
Really interesting example with the radiologist in terms of how we as human beings really do have a tendency to put a lot of trust in machines. And sometimes there may be a tendency to rely and not double check if the information is accurate. So that wonderful example. So if a human can't check everything, there's a popular narrative that, well, let's just have AI check AI. So essentially an LLM as a judge. Does this actually solve the problem, or does it create more problems?
Well, it's definitely something that can help. And as you say, Jeff, it's being used quite widely now. The challenge is that LLMs are probabilistic. So that means we can't guarantee the outcomes for any given set of inputs. And if you were to rerun the same set of inputs a number of times, you'll get slightly different outputs each time. So if you have one probabilistic system checking another probabilistic system, you still can't be 100% sure that you're going to get the right answer. Maybe the odds go up of getting the correct answer, but it's still not watertight. And that's why I think that we will see increasing emphasis on deterministic software and then baked into hardware controls for AI systems. And in fact, there's an increasing amount of research going on into this, particularly for use, obviously, in high stakes domains. So thinking financial services, healthcare, safety areas, etc., where really regulators require certainty about outcomes. And that can only be achieved if you have these types of deterministic technical controls.
Yeah, this is very much needed. My time in financial services working for very large banks, this was definitely one of the challenges that we continue to run into to come up with deterministic ways to check all of the probabilistic algorithms that we were building. And again, not because we wanted to necessarily, but because the regulations, the level of exposure with the law and the various places was really significant. And so it was definitely state of mind with us. And so I want to switch gears real quick. I messaged you late last night about an article that alarmed me. And so I want to kind of create a real example. Security researchers documented a case called Eitel-Porter, the first ransomware attack that ran an end-to-end opportunity or an end-to-end path by AI, where no human was in the loop, no human was at the keyboard. What are your thoughts about that? And is that scary? And oh my!
I mean, yes, it is concerning. There's no doubt about it. And this is one of the challenges about AI, as indeed, some other types of technology, that they are, as we say, dual use. They can be used to good purpose, but they can also be used by, unscrupulous people for bad purposes. And the more powerful the AI becomes, the greater the effectiveness, if you like, of the tool that's in the hand of the bad actor. And exactly what we see as one of the advantages of agentic systems, the fact that they can run autonomously now for large, durations and execute a large number of things, that of course can be put to bad use. It's an increasing game of cat and mouse. You could say in one way it always has been in the field of cybersecurity, but that will probably accelerate with the use of AI and with increasingly powerful open weight models. So, also in the last few days, we've seen K3 come out, which some people are suggesting is much closer to the level of the frontier models, the closed frontier models from the US. So these open weight models are then available for anybody to use with no, far fewer safeguards and controls on them. And definitely something like K3 appears to have far fewer restrictions and controls imposed on it than the closed models from the leading frontier labs. And those kinds of tools are going to fall into the hands or easily get into the hands of bad actors. So I think this is something we're going to have to watch and fight against very, very carefully in the coming months.
Wow, that is really, really scary. And I love how you frame that. As wonderful as AI is for practitioners like yourself, it can be used for good or bad. And that's something that we have to really be aware of. Let me ask you this. You built the governance framework for Accenture and kind of implemented that. What are ways organizations can stay maybe ahead of the bad actors in terms of protecting themselves? How do AI governance programs need to be maybe updated or overhauled or developed in a way that we can catch these types of challenges? Or are we not there yet?
So I guess if we're talking about specific attacks from outside of the organization, then the first thing is that the AI governance team and the AI team in general need to work very closely together with the cybersecurity team. Companies, organizations have had cybersecurity teams for a long time. There's fantastic work that's done by those individuals in organizations. They need to collaborate very closely with the AI team because AI opens up new attack windows. And that's particularly true with generative AI and AI agents. Now, there were some methods that bad actors could use with what I call traditional AI. So that would be machine learning approaches that we had before generative AI. An example might have been if you have a self-driving vehicle and it's reading traffic signs, researchers were able to show that by placing some black tape in certain positions on some road signs, you could confuse the AI system and it would misread the sign. So it would misread the speed and it would therefore cause the car to behave incorrectly. So there were some avenues for attack even before we moved to generative AI and to agents. But obviously, once you move to generative AI, you typically have some kind of chat interface. Not always, but generally you have some kind of chat interface. Often that's open to third parties or the public. One of the most common use cases for generative AI at the moment will be in customer service and, where people can input information or ask questions. Well, that immediately gives a route into the kind of heart of the company for any bad actor to try and make the model misbehave. That's where a lot of work is done. Both by the model companies themselves and by the organizations deploying them to really try and guard against jailbreaks and other types of attack that come in through that generative AI interface. Then as we move to AI agents, well, now you have agents going out and participating, let's say, on the internet. So that means they are exchanging information with other websites, potentially with other agents. They may be making purchases. They may be passing on information. Some of that might be confidential or secure, need to be secure. So again, once you get that activity outside of the organization's perimeter, you again are opening yourself up to new attack vectors for bad actors to try and kind of hook into or subvert the behavior of those agents. And let's face it, in the world of AI agents, we're all still novices. Agents haven't been around that long. And so the defensive techniques are still being built and developing.
There have been many concerns from a lot of companies of even internal self-sabotage from employees by ingesting, as you said, through the normal interface, information that would damage the model or throw the model or help it to hallucinate more or kind of perform like you wouldn't want it to perform. So that's definitely something that we really have to be aware of. I'd like to give people something kind of practical they can use. If we can't keep a human on every action, how do you decide which actions truly need human oversight? How do you think about this?
Well, I think that risk appropriate controls is a fundamental aspect of AI governance for me. And what I mean by that is, if we're using AI in a very simple, straightforward situation, we don't want to impose overly strong controls, guardrails, etc., because we're just going to slow things down unnecessarily. So the first thing is some kind of risk triage. And I think when it comes to human oversight, there are maybe three key factors that you might want to consider. So one is obviously how consequential is the particular use case that you're looking at. Are the consequences extremely serious? If so, that's where you may want to say, okay, we absolutely need the human to make a final decision in every situation. The second aspect I would look at is reversibility. So how easy is it to undo damage if damage has been done? If it's pretty straightforward and easy to undo the damage, you might say, well, actually, we can afford the occasional mistake because it's very easy to just roll back and undo it. And the third criteria potentially to consider would be contestability. So what do I mean by that? To what extent is whoever is impacted by the AI system, to what extent are they owed some kind of explanation as to what happened? To what extent do they have the right to redress, to have things put right, etc.? Now, you could argue under the EU's GDPR rules that actually any automated decision by AI entitles the person on the receiving end to have redress. So I think that's a criteria to apply sort of with nuance, but in particular, how consequential and how reversible would the impact of the AI be? Those would be my key criteria.
There are so many examples that we are seeing in the courts today where agents have acted and have given the wrong price for something, where the courts held that the company was liable for the actions of that agent, and they had to honor the request. And so that's something that I think a lot of companies aren't really aware of. And your idea of, can it be reversed? That is incredible. That is really, really important. And a lot of companies are deploying agents without any of this context. It's something that's fun and new with Claude and ChatGPT and other types of tools, without considering the consequences those three consequences that you just named out. So really glad to have this conversation. I want to continue our conversation with agents. Agents are really being adopted at a much faster rate than many of the experts anticipated. And the UK or the England is much more, Europe is much more advanced in terms of their kind of legislation, certainly with the EU Act, I think going into effect, is it next month in August, where there's going to actually be fines and penalties?
Parts of it go into effect in August. Some parts of it have been delayed now until 2027. It comes in stages, basically. Yeah.
Got it. Well, I love that staged approach because it gives the scientists and the practitioners and organizations time to kind of really adjust and tailor those solutions. Here in the United States, we've don't have as many guardrails with regard to particularly agentic agents or really Gen AI. So I wanted to ask you, in my mind, there's an analogy that an AI agent is kind of like an employee, a new hire. When you onboard a new employee, you don't give them keys to every door in the building. You don't give them access to all the machines and all of the documents, all the critical information. You don't let them have 24-hour access to everything. And there's generally someone, approving the actions of that employee. How does that translate to agents? Are there any parallels there that could be easily understood from just, everyday people?
There's an increasing tendency from a lot of people to say, you should literally treat an agent like a team member. There have been a number of different studies that suggest that that can be quite risky, because if you think of the agent as a team member, then you start to attribute accountability to the agent, because if a team member did something, you'd expect that team member to bear the consequences, if it goes wrong. But an agent can't do that. An agent cannot be accountable. A human needs to be accountable for an agent. And so I think there are risks in treating agents literally as if they are a colleague or an employee. That said, I do think that the approach that you take for onboarding a new employee, as you suggested, is very helpful in terms of thinking about what you would do for an agent. So let's think through, we have a new employee starting. What kinds of things do you do? Well, first of all, you're going to give them, let's say, the company rule book. Hopefully they're going to read it, but they're going to get a set of policies. They're going to get a set of instructions and things, some training, stuff that they have to do, shouldn't do, etc. Same is true for agents. They should have a set of policies, a set of governing documents, etc., that govern their behavior and tell them what they should and should not do. You're going to give that new employee context. You're going to give them a task. You're going to explain the context around the task. And then that is what helps them to then go off and actually do something. Again, you do the same with agents. You give them context. You give them very clear instructions about what they're supposed to do and so on. You would be saying to the employee what kinds of knowledge sources, systems internally, etc., they're allowed to use. And they get given a set of permissions to access different parts of the organization's, infrastructure. Again, the same holds true for agents. We don't want the agent going everywhere. We're going to give the agent, permission to go and look in certain databases, maybe read access or read write for certain things and so on. Again, the employee will be given a set of tools, approved tools that the organization has said we use Excel, we use, whatever it is. The agent, again, should be given a defined and approved set of tools, not just go off and try and find its own tool set that might be, dubious tools that it picks up somewhere on the internet. And then finally, monitoring and oversight. If we've got a new employee, typically their manager is going to keep a close eye on them to start with. Gradually trust builds, but you're going to check in with them, you're going to watch what they do, you're going to give them feedback and so on. Again, all of those are behaviors that you would want to employ with AI agents.
Here's something I don't think most people have thought about. When one agent talks to another, how does anyone actually know who they're dealing with? I know you've compared this to how the web solved identity with domain names and certificates. Could you expound on that?
Absolutely. And it is an area that people are working on. So it's absolutely critical, both from a trust and from a liability perspective. When you're dealing with an agent, and when I say you, that could be you, a human, or it could be one agent dealing with another agent. Absolutely critical that you know who that agent belongs to. Is it a genuine agent? I'm obviously going to trust this agent differently if I know that it comes from a Citibank versus I have no idea where this agent came from. This thing is asking me for some personal information or for some money or whatever, and I can't identify where it came from. I'm going to treat those two situations very, very differently. So what we need is a universally recognized ID system, essentially, which is completely secure. And we have that with the web. We have web certificates, we have domain names, security, certificates for websites. Your browser will pop up typically and warn you if you go onto a website where the security certificate has expired. These are things that were developed in the early days of the internet to deliver this kind of trust, so that people knew if they went to a website, okay, we know that this belongs to a particular organization. We know that it's secure, and you can do financial transactions with that website because it's using secure technology and so forth. So we need that same level of infrastructure for agents. And I think, that, as I say, there are there are moves to put that in place at the moment. The other thing that you absolutely need is logs, detailed logs of exactly what activities your agents and third-party agents are undertaking. So we imagine a transaction that's being concluded between two different agents. We'll say that I've asked my agent to go off and book me a trip somewhere, and my agent is going and it's talking to a travel agent or to an airline or whatever it is, and they're negotiating backwards and forwards over times and flight and details and cost and all these things. And let's say that the end result is something that is way out of line. We want to be able to afterwards unpick, well, hang on a second, what went wrong? Which agent made the mistake that booked it on the wrong day, or that agreed to a ridiculous price, or whatever the problem is. And so we will need extremely detailed logs to be able to unpick that.
I want to kind of stay right where you are, talking about the moment something goes wrong, because things will go wrong. When an agent makes a mistake, how do you track who takes the hook? How do you even trace what happened? How is that built into the design of the entire system? I'm assuming it's something that's done ahead of time versus, real time.
So I think you hit the nail on the head there, Jeff. It is something that needs to be designed into the system. It's not dissimilar to the way that our computers now keep logs of things. If you've had some technical issues with your machine, then often somebody who is trying to figure out where the error has occurred will want logs. Many software programs keep logs of activity, some more detailed than others. And those are just generated automatically as a system is executing. The same needs to happen with agents. It needs to be inbuilt to all agents that they should be depositing a record of the steps and the activity that they're taking. Ideally, we then want that to be, tamper-proof. So you could imagine a high-stakes scenario where somebody wants to go back and actually try and fix the evidence after the event, right? So ideally, what we need is some kind of tamper-proof logs that are recorded and indicate when they were recorded and so forth, so that if they are altered afterwards, that becomes clear.
And so with agents being able to make various mistakes and having the proper controls in place, it seems like there's another consideration that needs to be made. You have kind of three types of agents. You have those three lanes of visibility. You've got the ones you can fully see, the agents that are internally built. You have the ones that you can see partially, and you have the ones that you can barely see, kind of the blind spot or agents. How do you manage between those three types of agents? How do you manage them interacting and still being able to protect the company?
Your agent, the one that you have complete control over, is built and instructed in such a way that it will only deal with legitimate third-party agents. That's why your agent should be demanding credentials, proof, etc., from a third-party agent before interacting with them. It shouldn't just happily interact with any agent that it comes across. Comes back to this idea of there being some ID, some certificate, etc., that my agent that I control can look at and say, oh yeah, okay, this is certificate, it's validated, it's proven that we know who this other agent belongs to. The more tricky one, I guess, will be these, if you like, shadow agents that you were referring to, because people within your own company might be creating those. Even within, let's say, something like Copilot, Microsoft Copilot, that now has the ability that people can create agents for themselves. And that will become harder to, to police and maintain if you have an agent that's built by the central or by a data science team, an IT team, whatever, you can more easily put governance around that and ensure that it's, behaving in the way. But if you have agents being created just all over the place across the organization, we will have to work much harder to make sure that those agents are properly controlled.
That's a scenario I didn't even think about. When I think about shadow agents, for some reason, I think externally of the organization. But you're also saying that even within the organization, anyone within something as simple as Copilot can create agents that the central organization might not have full awareness of what it's doing, what it's designed for, who has access. Very interesting.
I mean,
very
again,
interesting.
Over time, I'm sure that the controls will be built in. If they're using a particular system that has the ability to create agents or to let employees create agents, those systems will themselves come with guardrails and controls that mean that people can't, go off and do whatever they feel like. But even at the moment, if you take something like Copilot, it's much harder to govern because an employee can essentially use it to do pretty much anything. As we design AI governance programs, we tend to focus on the use of any AI system as being the thing that drives the level of control and governance and risk, etc., that is associated with it. But with open-ended systems like a Copilot, these can be put to many different uses. The employee can upload HR information. They can upload their own personal information. They can upload, company IP. They can ask Copilot to do lots of different things. Now, again, we can try and build filters, guardrails that spot things that are being input that perhaps shouldn't be input. But it's harder to do that when the tool itself can be used for multiple different things.
Wow, you've raised a lot of questions that a lot of people that are going to be viewing this are going to think twice about their deployment of Copilot. But great things to be aware of. So I want to go to kind of the bigger picture, talking about responsible AI at scale, jobs, and kind of calming the fear. You've done something almost nobody has done. You didn't govern AI for one team. You built an entire responsible AI across an entire global enterprise. What did that actually take?
It was tough, to be honest. What really helped was that there was complete sponsorship and support from the CEO and from senior leaders in the organization. That was absolutely critical. But we were doing this at Accenture as one of the pioneers. There were very few other organizations that had really developed an AI governance program at scale like this at the time, because this was, I'm trying to remember, this was probably 7 or 8 years ago, I guess, when we started building this. It was a long time ago, right back at the beginning. And we had to really figure things out as we were going through it. And, to put it in context, at the time, Accenture had over 700,000 employees and was operating in over 100 countries. So this is a big, behemoth that you're trying to govern. And the decision was taken that the AI governance program would be set up as a formal compliance program. Now, that's a question that every organization needs to think about, is whether you're going to make it a formal compliance program or not. Some do, some don't. I think whatever your decision there, it definitely makes sense to look for existing governance programs and controls that you can build upon. So let's take a financial services organization. They have very advanced risk management and compliance procedures because they're regulated and they have had, these requirements for a long time. So most financial services organizations will look at their existing governance controls and will say, okay, what changes, what additions do we need to make for AI? Let's not build a whole new AI program. We're going to look at what we've got and we're going to insert additional things for AI. And I think that's a very pragmatic, very sensible way of approaching things. Data privacy, that's another one that most organizations have pretty good privacy controls and governance, and that's a good place you can build on as well. I think the other key thing is then figuring out the accountabilities. At the end of the day, you cannot build an AI governance program without collaboration across multiple different functions or teams. So you've got to have legal involved, you've got to have risk, you've got to have your tech team, AI team, IT team, whatever you call them. You probably are going to want HR involved in some way because it's going to impact HR and so on. You've definitely got to have cybersecurity involved. But the fact that you've got all these different teams involved means it's really important as well to have clarity about who's doing what, when, who's handing off, to which point, in which system, etc., and which individuals are accountable for what aspects of the program. So figuring that out at the beginning is absolutely critical to success.
Love it. Lots of collaboration that also that lets me know that you're a very convincing person. You know how to work cross-functionally with a lot of teams, because certainly in my experience, there's resistance to this type of adoption, and you really have to be compelling with leadership. And so I would love to hear more, at a later time about the kind of the challenges and the successes you had in terms of rolling things out and convincing people to really adopt this new way of thinking, because it really is a new way of thinking, really a new way of doing business. So that's great. Let's do the jobs question honestly. When we talk about jobs, because most people either panic or pretend. From inside real companies, if you could maybe give us your thoughts on what's real, what's hype, and how fast are we really moving? AI champions as coaches working alongside colleagues, the need for cognition, where people split their relationship between thinking, those who enjoy it and those who avoid it. So just kind of curious as to what are your thoughts with regard to that?
There are many experts sitting on both sides of the spectrum in terms of whether AI will net reduce jobs, take away jobs, or will actually increase the number of people in employment, or at least keep it the same. So I think that one's a really hard one to answer. But I think there are a number of components, if you like, of that decision, which we definitely can say with some certainty. So one is that AI is going to change jobs dramatically. There is no doubt about that, and that is happening already. So you cannot possibly, in my view, ignore AI. It would be like, people saying when the first PCs came out, oh, well, I'm not going to use a PC. I'm never going to use a PC in my work. You wouldn't be doing many jobs these days if you had said, back then, well, I'm not going to use a PC. It's just a part and parcel of pretty much everybody's job these days. Right. And AI will become absolutely the same. So you've got to figure out how to use AI to your benefit. And there was a really good article, I thought, by David Brooks in The Atlantic recently, where he talked about 3 different categories or types of people. He talked about people who essentially are very happy to just get to the answer as quickly as possible with minimal amount of effort. And the real danger for those people is that they outsource, if you like, everything to AI, and they kind of give up any involvement themselves. That's going to be a real problem going forward if you're one of those. At the other extreme, he talked about what he called the mental marathoners. And he made the point of, look, why do people run a marathon? Cars are much better at getting, from A to B than people are if you want to cover that distance. But people do it because they want to do it. It's something that they want to train for. They get pleasure out of it. They feel they've got achievement, etc. And that's the mindset that we actually need with AI. And there's a real danger that we haven't or aren't yet training people to understand that second sort of paradigm there. there was a good example just in the last week or two from Brown University, a professor there who noticed that the results in his midterms were much higher than previously was the case. In fact, he'd allowed the students to use AI. It was open book exam, and he was seeing 95+% results coming through in that midterm. And he was a bit suspicious that this was a big departure from previously what he'd seen with his class. So for the end of term exam, he made it invigilated, closed book, no access to the technology. The results dropped to under 50%. And actually a large number of students dropped out of the class completely. And what that clearly shows is that there were a bunch of students who were just interested in the grade and were not interested in actually learning and participating. And let's face it, learning is hard work, but learning is also, should be good. It should be something you thrive on. And the way to use AI is to really treat it as a sparring partner, as something to work with, to help you, not just to outsource everything to it. And I think that is what we need to teach in education. And that is also what we need to train for in companies. A lot of companies I've seen feel that they can just kind of give people some AI and magic is going to happen. And they don't understand that actually for many people, there's an imagination gap and a confidence gap that means that people need more coaching. They need more help, not just a half-hour, online video training course. There was a great talk I heard by the CIO of Paramount Studios at a conference in New York that I went to. And he said they only really saw the results of AI when they took technical people and sat them down in different functions and different teams, observed what people were doing, and really coached them to show them how they could use AI to improve their work. Then once people kind of got it, then they were off to the races. They were then, fired up and they were happy to use it, and they started to see really good results.
When you talked about the best way to use AI is like a sparring partner, where you're questioning it, you're looking at the results, you're giving inputs, and you're kind of iterating, going through the ideation process. There was a medical study, and I can't remember the location, but they did brain images of people that had used ChatGPT a lot and people that hadn't. It was either ChatGPT or Claude, and they showed literally in the brain imaging that the lack of thought and the kind of the lazy use of AI was manifested in the image. Like the brain actually showed a lack of usage, a lack of growth, a lack of rigidity. And so that really lines up with what you're saying. And I think there really is a danger for us as human beings in terms of our evolution and our growth, that we need to continue to use our brain. That's just a fundamental thing that we need to teach in the education system.
I completely agree with you. I think it's critical. Our brain is something that differentiates humans, and we need to cultivate that. We need to take that to the highest possible level.
Yes, agreed. Well, I want to get to something that I've been anxious to ask you. When I talk about artificial intelligence with family and friends and a lot of non-technical people in various settings, there's one analogy that always comes up. It never ends. They talk about Arnold Schwarzenegger's Terminator. So I want to ask you, because a lot of people are thinking about it, is that where we're heading? Are we heading as a society to the Terminator movie that everyone talks about?
So, look, I do feel that we aren't doing as much research into the safety and what's called alignment aspects of AI as we probably should be. If you look at the amount of money that is spent on furthering the capabilities of AI, as opposed to the amount of money that goes on to safety controls and understanding how it works and so forth, it's very disproportionate. And I think that should probably be, adjusted. So I do have, I do have concerns there, and I kind of feel that governments probably need to step in and assist in enforcing that. But I think that is something that isn't a near-term risk, and I do have a lot of confidence in the companies that are actually deploying and using AI. So I'm making a distinction here between the companies that are developing and building the frontier models, not talking about them for a moment. I'm talking about the vast majority of companies around the world that then take an AI model and they build it into some kind of system to work, to do something for their customers, for their colleagues, whatever it is. They're the ones who are actually building the things that generally, use AI. And my experience is that those companies want to do the right thing. They want AI that delivers accurate and correct results because they've made a business case. The business case to get the investment says, we're going to use AI to do X. We're going to achieve this particular outcome. Well, if the AI goes off the rails and does something else, it's not going to achieve X. So they won't have actually, delivered on the business case. And I think companies are very focused on that. And therefore, I think the risks are relatively low, because there's sort of self-governance, if you like, that comes from organizations that want the AI to work. They don't want to be the next company in the headlines because it was biased, or the thing promised a refund to somebody and that was incorrect, and then they didn't uphold it, etc. This isn't good for company image. So generally speaking, I think companies are trying to do the right thing. AI is moving very quickly, so they have to move fast to keep up with that. They obviously want to use the latest technologies because that drives growth, that drives better experiences and better products and services that they can deliver. So I think self-governance on the part of companies is the key thing, and that's, to be honest, where I focus. My effort and my work is with working with organizations to help them understand what they need to do to ensure that their use of AI is safe and responsible and delivers on the promise. And that's where I think we need to focus most of our efforts in the immediate term.
I love that. In one of our earlier conversations, we were talking about how robots are being adopted in the households. And you were laying out you had your AI governance hat on. And you were talking through things that the robot should have access to or should not have access to distinguish between adults versus children, doing things around the household. Could you repeat some of the things you were talking about with regard to things to be aware of, at least in the innovation space and the development of robots, and the challenges that are associated with that perfect robot that we see like on the Jetsons or something like that?
And I think, Jeff, this is actually a very good example to use to make the point that governance of AI governance and responsible use of AI isn't something that we should consider to be a brake on innovation. Quite the opposite. It's actually the thing that gives us the confidence to move forwards with AI. You imagine a robot without any kind of safety controls, governance, any kind of controls on its behavior running around in society, we would all be, freaking out, right? And it do lots of damage. It's the fact that organizations build in governance and controls and safety mechanisms, etc., that allow us to say, okay, we're comfortable with this self-driving car or with this robot or whatever it is. So I think that's a key point to make up front. But clearly, when we talk about robots, and in particular robots that are moving around, let's say, freely in society, rather than ones that are automating part of a factory production process, the reason I differentiate between them is because if the robot is tied down in a factory and it's doing one job, it's much easier to kind of contain it and control it. But if the robot is doing home delivery, or it's serving people in a cafe or whatever it is, you have so many real world situations that you need to think about and consider the safety security, privacy kind of context there. First of all, let's face it, people are going to try and make the robot go off the rails. That's the kind of thing that people do, right? So, did it misbehave because that makes a good video. So you've got to be thinking about all those kinds of ways that somebody could try and trick it or, make it do the wrong thing. There are big issues around privacy. You need the robot to be able to see what's going on in order to navigate, not bump into people, carry out its tasks. But then you have the immediate question, well, hang on a second, this robot is seeing me, is seeing people. Is it IDing me? Is it remembering me? Is it sending my image off somewhere and it's being stored in a database? What if there are children there? Is it capturing all the pictures of the children? And so on. So there are big privacy issues. And whereas if we interact with an AI system in a computer or something or other, we can get given a privacy statement to read. Now, okay, they're not great sometimes, privacy statements, but at least you have the opportunity to put some kind of privacy warning up in front of people. But it's hard to do that if this robot's wandering around town delivering the groceries. Is it going to have a big sign on its front saying, I can't see you, but kind of I can see you, but your clothes are blurred on me? Or, how are you going to communicate with people around privacy concerns? And people are going to be concerned about that sort of thing. How are you going to communicate with people that it's not going to knock over a child if their child gets too close, or healthcare settings? So there are big issues that we need to think about here the minute that robots start to interact more freely within the community. We will figure them out, I'm sure. We will, but a lot of that is about developing conventions that people are comfortable with as well, right? We need to get comfortable with new ways of doing things.
I love it. Ray, it has truly been a pleasure to just kind of pick your brain with all these wonderful things. The fear is understandable, but the answer isn't to slow down or to look away. It's to govern well and on purpose, because the companies and people who get this right don't just say safe. They actually get to use the technology with confidence. Risk avoided is not value created. The point was never just to be safe, it's to capture the upside safely. And Ray, it has truly been a pleasure. Thank you for your time. And that will conclude our.
Well, thank you, Jeff. Great questions. I thoroughly enjoyed the discussion. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.